Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Energy Quick Chat, where we rub minds with stakeholders and players in the energy markets. I am your show host, Justina Okechukwu. Now, with energy costs rising and the price of diesel skyrocketing, countries and companies have begun to embrace more ways to significantly cut down on the amounts they spend on electricity. Norwegian renewable energy investment firm Empower New Energy recently signed a $6.5 million solar energy deal with Nigerian retail supermarket Just Right Superstore for the replacement of diesel generators with solar PVs and batteries at 10 of its stores across the country. Terje Osmundsen is co-founder and CEO of Oslo-based commercial and industrial solar and storage investor Empower New Energy, which focuses on installing small and medium-sized systems in Africa. Thank you for joining me on the show, sir.
Pleasure, Justina.
Now, speak to me about your recent solar investment expansion and relationships in West Africa and the rest of the continent.
Yes, so Empower New Energy is a company who has raised now significant funding to finance the transition to affordable clean energy by industry and industry, commercial and industrial users in Africa. And as you know, Justina, the potential is enormous. Just as a reminder, Africa last year had less than 0.4% of the world's solar installations, whereas Africa has 60% of the world's solar resources. And Just Right in Nigeria, which is a fast-growing grocery store chain addressing the unserved markets outside the big cities of Nigeria, they have found that the energy cost is just unsupportable. And also they have found that in their communities, there's a lot of enthusiasm for moving away from polluting diesel generators to solar and batteries to power their stores. So we have the pleasure working with our development and installation partner, PowerCell and Just Right, to demonstrate that grocery stores in Nigeria can be run efficiently, economically, and sustainably on solar power. This is just one of several investments we plan to do in Africa in the next years.
Yeah, so I'm also aware that you're currently in Ghana and for the commissioning of Ghana Nuts Company Solar Power. How much investment is in this pipeline?
Yes, we had a fantastic event yesterday with the presence of both the Norwegian ambassador, EU and EU delegation, and our partners, first of all, our partners here in Ghana, where Mr. Obe Asante, who is the founder of Ghana Nuts and a very visionary person in the agro-processing industry, he is now working with several thousand women in Ghana who are collecting shea nuts and bringing their shea nuts to Ghana Nuts. And Ghana Nuts is processing this into high-quality, high-valued products, which is then exported to Europe and Asia and United States for use in the cosmetics or pharmaceutical other industries and chocolate production. This is an example of the kind of development that we are supporting. And what we are doing is that we are now have opened the solar power plant, which will produce solar energy for this operation. So they will reduce not only their carbon footprint, but also reducing the energy costs of this operation. This was a 700 kilowatt peak production. And the good news is that we also signed at the same time the contract with the same owner of the Ghana Nuts Group for 2 new projects in the same group, because they are now so motivated to actually turn all their operations to solar, seeing that it saves energy cost and brings a lot of benefits for the environment and not least the future climate.
Now, that's interesting. Now, what do you consider as the main obstacles to increase solar energy investment in Africa?
Yeah, so you could say that the main barrier, of course, for solar in Africa is that the renewable energy like wind and solar has high capital cost, but very little operational cost, which means that you need the capital upfront to finance your energy for the next 20, 30 years. Of course, that requires that you have access to capital, and governments and companies in Africa are not in a situation very often they're able to mobilize that capital. So what we are doing, we are now in particular focused then on not governments, but primarily businesses and communities and agricultural users. What we are doing is to bridge that gap so that we finance together with our local and working with the project with our local partners and make sure that we can finance in this for a period and before the asset is transferred. So access to financing is the key barrier which we are trying to address. There are also other barriers, of course. Regulations in many African countries are not yet updated. One simple thing is what you will call net metering. So if a company produces electricity via solar, they should be able to export their excess electricity back to the net, back to the grid. And that is now coming gradually in Africa as well and will also help. But I think it's also very important to highlight that the currency situation and the finance situation and the currency turbulence, exchange rate turbulence we have seen in many countries also is a barrier. But I think that if you are bringing a foreign investor onto your project, you will see that you will be able to lock in your electricity cost for a long time, which will not be dependent on currency fluctuations, but over a long time you will save significant compared to the high interest rate you are paying locally. But there are many barriers here, both in terms of regulations, in terms of financial situation. But first of all, there are lots of opportunities, and that's what we would like to focus on.
Now, I read a recent article by you, and you stated that according to the IEA, Africa has the potential for turbocharged growth in renewables. Now, my question is, how can this be achieved?
Yeah, so I think what we have to state is that Africa is the only continent in the world where you don't have we don't have incentives or specific premiums or incentives for shifting to solar or to renewables. Like in most countries, you will have either feed-in tariffs, you will have renewable energy mandates, you will have tax, like the United States have introduced enormous package of tax credits. So on the one hand, when it is considered as risky, there are also fossil fuels are subsidized. So many companies or many users will hesitate because they don't see the immediate benefit. And I think the change maker here could be that Africa is able to introduce some kind of carbon credit financing for that shift. Because the reality is that every kilowatt hour produced by renewable energy in Africa replaces fossil fuel. And it should be very simple. You should not need to have a very bureaucratic system, but it should be very simple for the world community to set up a carbon and participate with the companies, big companies who are seeking to be net zero and governments who are seeking very ambitious climate goals. If they were willing to allocate a small premium, I say small because it's very cheap compared to what is the situation in Europe. But you can imagine if you had a $20, $30 premium as a carbon credit to the African market, I will can assure you will see much more rapid uptake. So I think the potential is there, the trend, the growth is there, but what you need is a massive market-driven incentive to make sure that this can go much quicker. And I see that there are, fortunately, some discussions and proposals working in that direction, but we need to move quick. We don't have too much time.
Now, let's talk more about the energy sector in Ghana. What's new from both the government and the private sector side of things?
Yes, so the situation in Ghana is that because of the you could say that Ghana had made some you could say very not very smart contracts with several providers of private power from the fossil fuel. So that created a situation where Ghana suddenly had too much electricity. Unfortunately, this was dirty electricity, but had too much electricity. So that forced the Ghanaian government to actually put a brake on new license and new permits for solar. Now, I'm very glad to hear that, and this is what we experienced in a workshop we had last week in an event organized by the Norwegian Embassy with participation from the Ghanaian government and regulators, is that the Ghana government is now opening up again for companies to actually enter power sales agreements, power purchase agreements with private providers. That is very important. That has been actually been forbidden for some time. We have other arrangements which have been possible to do, but now things are opening up. And also, Ghana is now in the process of implementing net metering, which means that energy users in Ghana who is signing up for a contract for provision of solar energy with companies like Empony Energy or others, they can also sell electricity which they don't use back to the grid. And it's important to remember that we are talking here about projects that is going to have a lifetime of 30 years or more. Even if you have to change your panels and you are going to upgrade with more efficient panels, these are infrastructure which will rest for a long time. And what we are offering is possibility for the energy users to be the ultimate owner. So once the contract is terminated, payments have been made according to the contract, the assets belongs to the owner, and that means they can have very cheap electricity for many years to come. And I think it's important that, like Mr. Asante, who is the owner of Ghana Nuts, that industry owners also think long term, that if they lock in contracts now, they will actually be able to have access to that infrastructure for themselves in 15, 20 years' time.
Now, what's next for you folks at Empower New Energy for the rest of 2023 and beyond?
Yes. So Empower New Energy is a Norwegian company but with the investors based in Africa and Europe. Our main investor is Climate Fund Managers, who is based in South Africa. We have Norfund as an investor, and we have a team which is now 13 different nationalities. We have offices in several African countries. So I would say that the main issue for us now in Empower Energy is to scale up, to make sure that this very, we could say, Pan-African organization can work, making sure that we bring the benefits of having all this local presence and leveraging our unique partnerships so we can grow even quicker, because the demand is very high. Of course, it takes time to make sure the contracts, the projects are sufficiently, de-risked and reviewed and prepared. So the main challenge for us now is to leverage this fantastic organization we have built up over a short time and be able to scale up and work in several countries in parallel so that we can take our role in this very important green transition. Because solar definitely is the future. It is not something that the Western countries are imposing on Africa. It is Africa's future, because it's the only way for Africa to be independent of imports of fossil fuels and leveraging your own fantastic resource, which is solar, and many places also wind.
Thank you for those insights, Terje Osmundsen, co-founder and CEO of Empower New Energy. It's a pleasure to have you on the show and keep covering those milestones. And that's it on our Energy Quick Chat this week. Thank you everyone for watching. I am Justina Okechukwu. Bye for now.